Okay, welcome back to another episode of Cooking with a Veteran. I'm your host, Dave Rogers, and today we're going to be cooking an Hungarian version of goulash that I learned when I was in Bosnia, and I'll talk more about that later. But this isn't a goulash. If you grew up in New York City school systems, to us goulash was basically mac and cheese with sloppy joe added into it, which was strange because a lot of the cafeteria workers were from Europe, and so it's strange to see them. It's kind of like, you know, having a bastardized version of Chinese food that we eat here in America. So let's get started into, again, I'm going back to my skillet here. Normally I would cook this in my grandmother's saucepan. However, you know, I want you to see what I'm doing here in the pot. And one of the things I'm doing a little bit differently, so, you know, I like to soak my root vegetables, and in here I have my potatoes. I'm going to go ahead, and this is a little trick I learned when I was in Germany to help the cooking go a little bit faster. I'm going to take all my root vegetables. I have my potatoes, I have my carrots. You know, I like to use my different color carrots. I have my parsnip and turnip in here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to boil these, not all the way through, but I'm going to boil them for about 5 minutes. And what that's going to do is it's going to open them up, and so that when I put them into the soup, it's going to absorb the seasoning a lot better. So I'll go ahead and I'll cover that. Typical goulash that we know of has beef, okay? Beef for like stew beef. You notice I've been brining. You can see the salt on my beef there. I'm also going to, at this time, I'm going to add a little bit of flour to my beef, and that's going to thicken up the sauce when I put it into the pan. I'm also, at this time, I'm preheating my pan. I have, of course, as always, my Irish butter. I'm going to throw some Irish butter in there, let that start to cook up. A little bit of my virgin olive oil. I'm going to get that going around. And then I have my onions, okay? About 2 medium white onions. I also have some garlic, some ginger. I found some red shallots, which I really like, so I'm going to add that in there. Now goulash, what's interesting about goulash is it has a good amount of paprika. And you know, we here in America, we usually use paprika kind of as just like a garnish, you know, like just for looks. More than for flavor. But in Europe they ing paprika. When they use paprika, it's really for flavor within the meal. Alright, I'm also adding frying peppers, and I have a little bit of my leek. Alright, and that's my little bit of add to it. I like to put leek in my goulash. I like the taste of it. Alright, so I'm going to fry these up. I'm going to add a little pepper. I'm going to add some of my adobo. I'm not going to add salt right now because I brine the meat so it has salt on it already, and I don't want it to be too salty. You want these to cook until they're almost translucent. You can see they're almost translucent. And at this time I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in my beef. And I don't want to cook my beef all the way through because remember, this is going to sit and cook for a while. But I want to brown it up some. I'll also be adding into, once the beef is browned up a little bit, I'll be adding some white wine. You know I love cooking with my alcohol. Today it's white wine. Alright, so I got about another 2-3 minutes for the beef to brown up. While it's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some more of my seasoning. I'm going to add a little bit of saffron. You know I like cooking with saffron. And in Europe, they actually, and especially in remote villages, they cook with a lot of wildflowers. So I was telling you that I learned this, actually I learned this dish while in Bosnia. I mean, I've had goulash before, but I didn't know how to cook it. And when I was stationed in Bosnia, we had some refugees staying at the camp, and they would cook goulash. And on one of my days off, I just kind of sat around the tent and watched this woman cooking goulash, and I realized how simple it really was. You know, sometimes we look at a dish and we go, oh, it's, you know, it must be very complicated. But the truth is, most meals are actually pretty simple to cook. And the trick that I learned about, boiling your root vegetables a little bit, I learned that while I was stationed in Germany. There was this young woman that worked in my office from Germany, and she didn't like to spend a lot of time cooking after work. And so she would boil up her vegetables a little bit so that she could reduce her cooking time when she was cooking her meals. And I thought that was pretty clever. Yeah. Alright, so my meat is coming along. At this time, I'm going to go ahead now and add my paprika. And it's about 2 tablespoons of paprika that I'm going to add in. And the reason I'm adding it now, if you remember one of my earlier episodes, I talked about, adding the seasoning. And I'm going to reduce this a little bit. I talked about adding the seasoning to the meat, because then it really carries through the meal. If you wait till the end and put your seasoning in, you're kind of missing on some of that flavor throughout the meal and throughout the meat. You really want that to carry. Oh, this smells great. If you could smell this right now, it smells wonderful. All right, I'm also going to add, this is dandelion flowers. I'm going to add a little bit of that in there. And I love the flavor that it gives to a meal. Not a lot, just a little bit. Now there's one ingredient that is in traditional goulash, which I cannot find locally. It's cayenne seed. I haven't been able to find them locally, so that's the one thing that won't be in this meal. All right, now that my beef is almost halfway cooked, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add in my white wine. I'm not going to add my broth yet. Remember what I said before is, if you're making a stew or something with vegetables, you want to save the broth almost for last when you put it in, because what you want is you want to make sure you have enough room for all the vegetables inside of the stew. All right, this time I'm going to add some chopped tomatoes in. I mean, just look at that. That looks amazing, right? And some people will tell you that, potatoes and carrots are optional. To a point they are, but to me, traditional goulash is really good when you have potatoes and carrots. So I'm going to go ahead, I've been letting them soak. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put them in. I can see that they're softened up a little bit, which means that they're going to carry the flavors nicely. And the great thing about goulash, I mean, if you don't do the boiling, the great thing about goulash is, again, it's one of those one-pot meals. So I have my, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off that. I have my vegetables in there, and I'm going to mix that around. Going to go ahead and I'm going to add in a little bit of salt, 2 bay leaves, and now I'm going to add in, this is my beef broth, and I have 2 cups of beef broth here, and I'm going to add that in. The other great thing about something like goulash is that goulash is a meal within itself. You don't need, I mean, I've seen people put on top of noodles or rice or whatever. You can do that, but you don't need to. Goulash really is a meal all to itself. All right, so I got that in there. Lots of vegetables, lots of meat. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put some parsley and a little bit of cilantro on top. I'm going to lower this to, not too low, but a little low. I'm going to cover this, and I'm going to let this sit and cook for about 40-45 minutes. And that basically is how you make Hungarian goulash. I hope you enjoyed joining us on this episode of Cooking with a Veteran. If you like my show, go ahead and like and follow in our YouTube page and below. And of course, if there's anything you'd like to see me cook, go ahead and reach out to me. And until next time, hoorah!